Welcome to The Explainer. You can learn a whole lot about a country just by looking at the news from a single day. What does one 24-hour news cycle really tell us about a nation of over 1.4 billion people? Well, today we're going to find out. We're putting one day in India, December 7th, 2025, under the microscope. We're going to uncover the hidden connections and see the bigger story of a country that's always in motion.
All right, let's just jump right into the chaos of this one day. At first glance, these headlines look totally random, right? You've got this one about the government having to cap airfares because a huge airline basically just imploded, sending ticket prices through the roof. Then, at the exact same time, you've got politicians just going at it in a massive debate over the legacy of the country's very first prime minister. And let's be real, this isn't just about the past. It's a fight over India's history and what it means to be Indian today. And then you've got these gut-wrenching stories coming out of Mumbai. People are, they're literally choking on toxic air. It's gotten so bad that doctors and even the courts are raising red flags. And to top it all off, the Supreme Court drops this landmark ruling that completely redefines the rights of one of the most invisible groups in the whole country. So, you see, these things might seem random, but they're not. They're all threads of the same story. So let's start pulling on them and see where they lead. So, our first theme kicks off with just utter chaos in the skies. The whole thing is centered on India's biggest airline, Indigo. And on this particular day, their entire operation just melted down, a near total breakdown. And to get a sense of just how massive this is, think about this. 6 out of every 10 people flying in India are flying on Indigo. That is a huge market share. It basically means that when Indigo sneezes, the whole country catches a cold. And on this day, boy, did they have more than a cold. They had a massive problem. Get this, the airline canceled 2 out of every 3 of its flights. Can you just picture that? Airports packed with hundreds of thousands of stranded people. Plans totally ruined. The country's travel network basically just stopped. So naturally, the government had to jump in. And they had to do it fast. They came up with this 3-part plan. First, they slapped caps on airfares so other airlines couldn't just start price gouging everyone. Smart. Second, they told Indigo, you will process every single refund by Sunday night, period. And third, they launched more than 75 special trains to try and help all those thousands of stranded passengers get, somewhere. And you know what's really interesting here? Just how detailed the government got. The Ministry of Civil Aviation didn't just put out some vague press release. No, they set very specific price limits based on how far you were flying. So for a short flight, it was capped at 7,500 rupees. For the longest domestic flights, 18,000 max. This was a really direct, almost surgical move to protect people from a market that was going completely haywire. But, of course, with a crisis this big, it didn't take long for it to turn into a political blame game. The opposition Congress Party immediately started pointing fingers at political donations. They brought up how Indigo's parent company bought 56 crore rupees worth of these things called electoral bonds, which are, a pretty controversial way for companies to donate to political parties. And they pointed out most of that money went to the ruling BJP. The BJP, for their part, just brushed it off, saying, hey, our focus is on fixing this and helping passengers. Okay, let's shift gears. We're moving from the crisis in the air to the political battles happening on the ground. Because the drama on this day wasn't just about flight cancellations. It was also this really intense fight over India's past. And it shows these deep divides about the country's history and its most important figures. And the main flashpoint? India's first prime minister, Jawaharlal Nehru. On one side, you have Congress leader Sonia Gandhi, who's accusing the government of basically trying to rewrite history, to distort Nehru's ideas and tear down the very foundations of the nation. And then boom, the ruling BJP fires right back. They argue that Nehru's real legacy is actually a string of historic blunders, like Article 370 in Kashmir, and even losing land to Pakistan and China. And this is just a perfect example of how history becomes a tool in modern politics. Right? It was also the 70th death anniversary of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who was a huge figure in writing the Constitution. And suddenly, everyone wants to claim his legacy. You've got politicians praising his ideals, you've got others accusing their rivals of trying to erase him from history, and one chief minister is even promising to build walls around his statues to protect them. And then, at the same time, you get this super provocative move. A politician uses the anniversary of the Babri Masjid demolition, a hugely sensitive day, to lay the foundation for a new mosque. It's all about connecting old wounds to today's politics. So that brings us from all that political hot air to the actual, literal air that people are breathing. And our next theme is all about the human cost of progress, a story that's unfolding every day in the smog-choked skies of India's biggest cities. You can look at all the charts and data you want, but this quote from a Mumbai resident named Shabnam Abdul Ghaffar Shah, it just cuts right through all of it. Her doctor told her why her family's been sick for a month. Hawa kharab hai. The air is bad. It's so simple and so devastating. It just puts a real human face on a crisis that can feel, well, pretty abstract sometimes. So the question is, where is all this bad air coming from? Well, a study from the State Pollution Board gives us a pretty clear breakdown. Yeah, cars and trucks are a big part of it, but look at this. A whopping 30% of the worst pollution in Mumbai comes from construction and just road dust. So the very things that look like progress, like growth, are also what's poisoning the air. And the effect on people's health? It's undeniable, and frankly, it's alarming. Doctors in Mumbai are seeing a threefold increase in kids with respiratory problems, just compared to last year. We're talking going from about 2 cases a week to 6. It's a cold, hard clinical fact that proves what people like Shabnam are already living through. Meanwhile, you go nearly 1,500 kilometers away to Delhi, and guess what? It's pretty much the same story. The chief minister there is also dealing with a massive pollution crisis, and the response is a classic political playbook, isn't it? First, you blame the legacy problem you inherited from the people before you, and then you promise a big, shiny, futuristic solution, like converting all public transport to electric vehicles by 2026. All right, for our last theme today, let's leave the streets and the skies behind and head into the courtrooms. Because on this same day, something really significant happened in the long, ongoing fight for human rights and justice in India. So, to understand this, we've got to start with a specific law, the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act from 2016. The idea behind it is pretty simple, but it's also really profound. It's all about making sure that people with disabilities can be a full part of society with dignity. But here's the big question that was always kind of floating out there. Does all of society also mean inside a prison? For a long time, that was a huge legal gray area. Well, on this day, the Supreme Court of India came down with a landmark ruling and said, without a doubt, yes, the protections of that act now apply inside prison walls. And what really pushed this forward were the tragic deaths of 2 disabled activists, G. Sayababa and Stan Swamy, while they were in custody. Their cases shined a harsh light on the absolutely inhumane conditions that prisoners with disabilities were facing. And the court didn't just stop at making a big statement. No, they laid out a whole list of detailed instructions for every single prison in the country. They now have to provide things like wheelchairs and other aids, specialized medical care, even better visitation rights so families can help. And here's the real kicker. For the first time, if a prison official abuses a disabled inmate, they can be personally fined up to 5 lakh rupees. I mean, this is a ruling with some serious teeth. It's designed to force change. So, that brings us right back to where we started, doesn't it? A massive airline collapse, a bitter war of words over history, entire cities literally gasping for clean air, and a quiet but powerful revolution in prisoners' rights. When you put it all together, what does this one day of news really show us? It shows a nation grappling with huge questions about corporate power, about its own identity, about the real cost of its ambitions, and that never-ending search for justice. These aren't just random headlines from one day. These are the fault lines, the cracks, that are going to shape India for all the days to come.